Welcome back to the Schmozone, episode number 87. I'm Dave Schmulenson, a.k.a. the Schmo. My co-host is
Helen Yee with Helen Yee Sports.
And today's guest is one of the most brilliant minds in mixed martial arts. He's the co-host of Morning Combat, which is also up for nomination for Best MMA Programming. He's Luke Thomas. He's on CBS Sports. He's on Showtime Sports. He's everywhere.
I'm here now. I'm on Schmozone, so happy to be here. Hello, Helen. Hello, Dave. Can I call you that? Is that okay?
That's okay.
What do you prefer?
I prefer anything,
Okay.
because my last name growing up is Schmulenson. So Schmo, Schmoley was always like a nickname. Everyone had so many different names for me. So if you call me Dave, Schmo, David, doesn't make a difference. I'll know who you're talking to.
Well, I'm happy to be here, so thank you for having me. Very generous introduction. I don't know if it's quite true, but I certainly am the host of Morning Combat. How about that? Or one of them anyway.
Now, you're a busy man, a lot going on, a lot of fights, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think we should start off with what's going on for tomorrow. The weigh-ins were today, UFC 269. What did you make of everything that took place? Because one of the fights is off.
I didn't hear which one of the fights is off.
The Matt Schnell versus Alex Perez.
That's disappointing. Who failed there?
Basically what happened after Matt Schnell.
Did you guys go this morning?
We were
Yeah,
there
we
this
were
morning. And then are you going to be at the ceremonial stuff afterwards?
Gonna try.
Going to try. I mean, you're a busy man. You're everywhere. You got Showtime crew here behind the
A little
scenes
bit,
filming and
bit.
stuff. No, so right after he weighed in, you know how he's on stage and at the apex, you walk behind and then you kind of go back to the waiting, holding area? Well, he never made it all the way back there. We heard some kind of loud coughing and stuff like that. Then it was kind of silent for a while. Then you saw some, medical professionals rushing back there. I know the Nevada State Athletic Commission came back there, and then everyone was just kind of waiting and rumbling, and he kind of never made it back out there.
Okay, well, that's disappointing. I like Matt Schnell a lot, actually. Oh, well. All right, the card is still ridiculous.
It's fantastic. It's fantastic. Although we were looking forward to seeing Leon Edwards and Jorge Masvidal fight.
Yeah, it's kind of a bit of a forgotten storyline this week, right? It's funny because I don't know what you guys use, but I'll start my day a little bit on bestfightodds.com just because you can just see the lay of the land of what's coming and what's not. And you can still see I guess one place hadn't taken the odds off for Edwards versus Masvidal, so it was still part of that card on that website. And I was like, shit, I forgot that fight was even on that card. Can you imagine if that was part? And honestly, I'll say this. You guys, I'm sure you're feeling a little bit more than I am maybe because you're a little bit closer to it, but I feel like this is the first time, Poirier outside the Khabib fight, outside the Conor fights. Let's see how popular he is now. But if you had thrown Jorge and Leon on this card, dude, that was the perfect amount of spice to give it exactly what it needed,
I 100% agree with that too.
That's kind of what we were talking about yesterday after the press conference too.
Imagine those two at the press conference.
Oh, I know, good, because I did watch the presser. You had Cody and
Sean
O'Malley getting after it a little bit.
Yeah.
And dude, the face-offs were intense between Dustin and Charles, but it's your two favorite guys.
Right.
They're just not. They don't have that storyline.
They're not the type of guys to trash talk and spice things up just to get the extra clicks and stuff like that. They are respectful martial artists.
Right.
And unfortunately, you don't see enough of that. But
Right.
But as you know, in today's day and age too, these storylines, spicing it up. Sean O'Malley getting the clown color hair, that stuff sells. That stuff gets clicks.
It always has, man. When I first started watching the sport, I was a little bit in denial about what made things work, and obviously some things have changed a little bit. But in general, man, it's dude, they're not necessarily interested in who is the best fighter. As my phone goes off, right as I put it on silent. The argument is, or the reality is, they do care a little bit. It's not unimportant to them. Relevant combat sports is important, but what they really care about is star power and how that interacts with other star power and what kind of celebrities attached to it, what kind of, to your point, sort of narrative storyline. That really is, if you actually look at what drives the market, that's typically what drives the market the most.
Yeah, more of the entertainment aspect of it.
I know, it's not. It's certain methods of it are new, but that reality is, I hate to admit it, but it just is true,
That's what makes kind of the Suga Show, Sean O'Malley, such an intriguing character in today's mixed martial arts too, because obviously, during the heyday of the UFC really rising in popularity, the media tours, the Ronda Rouseys and the Conor McGregors went on, and then climbing the ranks of still fighting the best of the best. And you have a guy like Sean O'Malley, the self-proclaimed self-proclaimed unranked champion, the one getting the pop at these press conferences, the one that's, I wouldn't say necessarily cherry-picking his opponents, but he's not really fighting the climb that he needs for the popularity match that he has outside of the octagon. And it's just an interesting state to see where we're at, specifically with the UFC.
Yeah. He is... the last time I left Vegas, last time I was here was for Canelo. So I guess it must have been the July fight. Was he on that Conor card in July?
Yes.
I think he was, right? And I remember at the airport, he was actually at my next gate over, and we were both at the gates at the same time. I didn't bother him. I just let him be because, dude, he had a line of people to the fucking bathroom just wanting to. People were like, I'm late for my flight. Take a picture with me. Like, there was this horde of people. And to your point, like, he had the Cheeto Vera fight, but he lost that fight.
Yeah.
And so the other one's like, who did he beat to get here? Dude, you say like he didn't cherry pick. I know what you mean. I'm with you in the sense that, like, I don't think he's avoiding guys like, ooh, that's a tough fight. I don't want that. But he is cherry picking quite nakedly about, like, I'm going to do those things when I'm commensurately paid. We should sort of say he is cherry picking, but not in a way where it in any way signifies fear of challenge. He has this sort of self-marketing idea that he wants to tie into pay, and I don't know if it's going to pay off, but that's the reason for the season, man.
Well, he's not shy also by saying, I don't want to fight a guy who's just going to lay on me for 15 minutes,
right.
too. He wants to fight a guy that he knows is going to stand up and bang and strike and make an exciting fight for the fans, too.
It's like, dude, Nate Diaz cherry picks. Where did that get him? To the top of the fucking game. Can I curse? Is that okay?
100%.
Yeah, okay. It's an MMA podcast. I mean, if you can't, what are we doing? But you get the idea. Like, those guys, dude, when I was covering the game in like 2008, it was like the UFC's tough matchmaking was like an automatic call and response. Here's the toughest fight. Okay, we're going to take it. Everyone had that Cowboy Cerrone. I remember you probably interviewed Jeremy Stevens more times than I have, but I remember I interviewed Jeremy Stevens one time, and I was like, did you ever consider, I forget what fight it was. It's like, did you ever consider like declining this for a better opportunity? Because there was something in the news, whatever it was, that was a more lucrative offer. He's like, I've never been in the business of declining fights. I didn't know we could do that. You know what I mean? Like, that was what his era of MMA fighters did. Now you're seeing guys being like, wait a second, I'm trying to maximize my time here. Yeah, I'm going to make some clever choices. But again, I don't think Diaz or O'Malley is afraid of anybody. I think they're playing the cards a little bit differently than they used to.
So what do you think is the reason why we're seeing more and more of this happening?
The guys who are a little bit more cherry picking.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, in the way that we've discussed, not the way that it's sort of assumed negatively to be. I think because it, quite obviously, for the right situation, it works. And it's the only real leverage you could possibly have. Like, the market forces that dictate what you can pull from UFC negotiations they're not super favorable. But the one thing you might have is you have a lot of fighters who want to get after you. Some are going to make more money. You're going to make the UFC more money with better ones. There's a kind of a way to kind of pull UFC along at this point to a much higher degree of success for you. I would also say, dude, there's a better awareness of today's fighters being like, I got to get in, make money, and get out. You know this as well as I do, dude. How many times have you had an off-the-record conversation with someone's manager or somebody's coach who has told you that this A-level fighter is not here for a long time? Do they want to make a few big, giant paydays, and they want to get the fuck out? It's not the way the boxing game works, dude. They want to maximize that run to the nth degree. It is the opposite in MMA. They can't wait to get off the stove, And so I think people are just making choices about that orientation in a way. It used to be like, I'm going to prove I'm the best ever. Dude, I started covering MMA when people were doing it like, now these fuckers are getting paid for it. I did this when this was free. Like, that was a thing you had to entertain. And now they're just smarter about the long-term realities.
I mean, the reality, too, behind it is this sport's not even 30 years old. We've been alive. Just imagine, like, the NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball at the turn of the 20th century and the heyday when that was originating. We are still in an era and a time alive where it's just a complete evolution of this sport. Like, people, when they're first training mixed martial arts, they were going to all these different gyms. I have my boxing class here, my Muay Thai class here, jiu-jitsu this day, there. Now you have gyms and teams doing everything all at once, and you have a situation where people are growing up, I want to be a mixed martial arts fighter.
Sure.
You're having athletes that train from this at a younger age. We are still seeing the evolution of this sport grow right in front of our eyes, and what it looks like now might look something completely different 5-10 years from now.
It's totally true, and I also think there's probably, I don't know how folks feel about it, but I can tell you that years ago, even 10 years ago, but especially 15, MMA and boxing did not have significant crossover at all. And now these guys are trying to make money off each other any way they can, which some of them work, some of them don't. But I also think MMA fighters are kind of watching boxers a little bit and like, how are they getting around it? And their business model is different. We all know the stories. But some of the lessons about how to do this right, how to promote yourself, like Nate Diaz, like if you don't take care of your interest, no one else is gonna. You're starting to see some of that bleed over as well.
But are the guys on the lower level, like say the opening cards, like for example next week on the Showtime for Jake Paul, Tyron Woodley too, is it comparable to what the lower level guys of the UFC and stuff are getting at too, or how does that scale work? Because obviously we know at the top it's different.
Yeah.
But how is it like if you're just you're 6-1 or you're just trying to get in?
Yeah, so I would have to see the card to make. I've not seen the full part of the. I'll be candidly admit I have not looked at the full Jake Paul Tyron Woodley card, other than I know that Tommy Fury is out and Tyron's going to be in, so we'll see how that goes. But beyond that, I've not paid a ton of attention. So without knowing those specifics, what I would say as a general rule, let me give a recommendation to your viewers and your listeners. There's a guy by the name of John Nash. He goes by @HeyNotTheFace on Twitter. Has done probably the most extensive work around this, and he has looked at the economics of this. The basic idea is that there are certainly, there's going to be a ton of different cases for what if you're a high-level pro who has 15 fights, what if you're a mid-level pro who's 20-10 or whatever, if you've been in the game for a long time or you're with a big organization, there's going to be a lot of differences. But the general rule would be, and he has a graph where he charted all of these California payouts, what they have. And again, we don't know about bonuses. That could change the game to a degree. But basically what you find is that for anyone, let's say, I don't want to be too declarative, but certainly inside the top 15, top 20, to an extent the top 25, the pay is going to be pretty different between boxing and MMA. Prior to that, and even bleeding into that territory, you can find plenty of cases where MMA fighters make more. It's just that for the sustained, certainly for the super elite, and even for the good, it turns out that there's a pay discrepancy. But, as we all know, I've seen a million boxing cards, I'm sure you have as well, and then UFC has raised these objections previously where Friday Night Fights was on, and you see guys in the main card making, this is true, like $500 or something. Yeah, that's not even remotely comparable, obviously.
I did want to circle back, though, to what we kind of opened up with Leon Edwards and Masvidal, too. It's like we talked about star power, we went into it, but if you're Leon Edwards and you're the UFC, like, really, what is next? I mean, because if I'm Leon, there's only two fights that made sense for me. It's this Masvidal fight. You had the backstory, the three-piece in the soda, and then you have the championship rematch. He fought Kamaru in 2015. Obviously, you say Kamaru is lapping people in the division. Let the second opportunity happen for Leon Edwards, because it's been 6 years since they fought, and he got to have the rematch with Colby. He got to have the rematch with Jorge. Mm-hmm. What would you do if you're Leon?
So let me ask first: are you confident that they're going to make a Masvidal and Colby tough season? Reasonably confident?
I'm reasonably confident.
Okay, so let's assume that gets put into play. Those two are out of the question about what you're going to do. All right, so now you have Gilbert, Hamzat as a super wild card. That's whatever. And then you have Leon. Now what are you going to do? Personally, I would say it's a tough. Your call is a decent one, because you could do Hamzat versus Gilbert, and to me, Gilbert would be not that Hamzat per se deserves it, but we all know the arguments for it. But Gilbert would be like the ultimate test for him. I mean, arguably too much of one, right? You could make a claim that you're throwing him to the wolves by doing that. But there is at least an argument to be made as well that, like, what he can do on the ground. And by the way, Gilbert can wrestle, and he's nimble for the weight class, and he can strike, and he's got good experience. That's a way you could go, and then you could do Leon versus Kamaru Usman 2. I don't know how that would be very different, but you could do it. The other one you could do is, you could do Gilbert versus Leon. It doesn't do good for Leon because that's a super tough fight. And if Gilbert wins, you kind of have to give him another title shot at that point, because what would be left for him except Hamzat, and you get the idea. But those are really your best options as far as I can tell.
It's a matter of if Leon will accept it or not.
Yeah.
He's been screwed over more than anybody you can argue right now.
Totally. And if you're Leon, would you take if he took the Hamzat fight before, would you take it now? I don't know if I would take that now after the Diaz win. The Jorge one was perfect because, Jorge is obviously an incredible fighter, but he is closer to 40 than 30, and I just think that Leon has a very difficult style to deal with. Not so much that he is, some overwhelming dynamic force, but his ability to control each moment and then win rounds. He's next level with it, and I think that's a tough fight for a lot of folks. So he would have had, presumably, back-to-back wins over Nate and Jorge, again, in this theoretical construct. You're going to get a title shot. You're going to have some decent popularity after that, and now that got taken from him. So
When you mentioned Khamzat, I was just thinking about a few weeks ago, wasn't it rumored or weren't they trying to make him fight Nate Diaz?
Yes, they offered him to Nate. Nate confirmed it and was like, this is cherry picking. It's like, do I really think a Diaz brother is afraid of Khamzat? You might say that they're quite the opposite. Some might argue that they're delusional about their chances to beat all these top-level guys. Fine, say what you want. I don't in any way imagine he is afraid, but I do recognize he's like, okay, so what do I get if I win? A claim. You get a claim. But what do I get if I lose? You're giving all the star power to this guy that most American fight fans still don't know. Versus if you take another high-level guy, you could get a claim if you win, but it could be, depending on the matchup, much better for me to get my hand raised. Purse might be bigger, like a Conor fight, and I actually have a decent chance of winning. This is what I mean. It's like, dude, a rational decision is to be like, why the fuck would I ever fight this monster from Chechnya/Sweden? Like, fuck no. I'm going to go fight you mean I have a chance of making more money, getting more popularity, and winning by taking the X versus this? Why? This is not a difficult choice to make, other than this idea of like, we have to fight the best all the time. I'm glad folks do it, but it's not rational to expect everyone to.
But if Nate Diaz really has one fight left on his deal and we don't see his next fight being, let's say, Conor McGregor and that trilogy fight, will we ever see that fight ever happen?
You mean Nate versus Khamzat?
Sorry, no, Nate versus Conor McGregor.
So who else would he fight if it's not Conor?
Tony Ferguson?
That's not a bad fight, right?
Yeah.
I mean, here's the thing. You've seen Nate Conor twice. It's not like you didn't get it. You might not get it a third time. How much of a trade-off is it between Nate Diaz 3 and Conor, or Nate versus Tony? I'm not saying that they're equally interesting or equally as big in the market, but for one chance at Tony versus a third fight with Conor, there's something to be said for the Tony fight being fresh and new, competitive, interesting, equally, potentially, who knows what those two fucking savages could turn in, right? So I get the point. Fair enough. You may, in fact, lose it. That could be true, but it's hardly a substantial downgrade to include the Tony Ferguson fight as far as I'm concerned.
Well, before we get into the transition, which seems pretty natural, going into next week and boxing, the other side of things, because Nate Diaz is going to be involved with that because his buddy is fighting on that card, which could be setting up for a future Jake Paul boxing match. I do want to say that today's show is brought to you by Sheath Underwear. You are a veteran. The creator of Sheath Underwear is an Iraq War veteran, right. Robert Patton. You know, his balls would stick to his leg over there overseas in the desert. He created Sheath. These are the most comfortable pair of underwear I've ever had. I know you're an XL. I know your favorite colors are black and red.
That's
I got
true.
2 pairs for you.
That is amazing. Thank you, sir.
They're great. I mean, it seems weird at first by separating them, but I'm telling you, just the comfort that you have there and the stretch and just you never want to wear another normal pair of underwear ever again.
It's just an awkward Shark Tank pitch. You know what I'm saying? It's like, okay, I've got a great idea for underwear. What's your idea? Well, let's talk about the human anatomy. But I appreciate these. Thank you very much. Thank you to Sheath. Thank you to, what's the gentleman who works
Robert Patton.
Robert Patton, thanks for his service. And I will definitely. Yes. Another grown man is giving me underwear. You're not the first man to do that this year, by the way.
Okay.
Men are gifting other men underwear. I've noticed that.
It's a good gift. Use the promo code Schmo. Get 10% off when you visit sheathunderwear.com. Try it out.
I'm going to. Thank you.
Of course.
Very generous.
So going back to the, I guess next week, we're going to see you there too. You're going to be working with Showtime, for Showtime. And we got Jake Paul, Tyron Woodley too.
What's your level of, relative to what you were expecting with Fury?
Well, you know, I think this is a tougher matchup than Fury. However, how much has Woodley been training? Because I know maybe at most 2 to 3 weeks after that first fight, was it back in August in Cleveland when they fought? Mm-hmm. Jake was back in the gym. Jake was back working and developing, and we have a strong relationship with BJ Flores. And not too many people know this. I don't know if we announced this on the podcast, but a couple weeks before he boxed Nate Robinson, he did his training camp here in Las Vegas. He was training over in Bones Adams Prince Ranch Boxing Gym. That's what they call it. I know like Devin Haney and stuff like that. They've done some work there. And we had watched a little bit of Jake Paul. I've known about it because we actually watched the Logan Paul KSI fight. We were involved a little bit with Eddie Hearn in the zone and watching him fight like Addison Gibb, the YouTuber, just dwindling in it. We were at the right place, right time. I believe there was like UFC or boxing going on there. Maybe it was the Super Bowl in Miami, so we kind of made a pit stop over there, just keeping an eye on what was going on because we had known that what their intentions were. It was they want to transition and make a name for themselves in combat sports, and that's exactly what they've been doing, the Paul brothers. So we went there a week or two before the Nate knocked out, and the one thing I noticed when we watched was the hand speed of Jake Paul. We just watched a completely different kid from when he boxed the YouTuber Gib versus what he did to Nate Robinson. Sure enough, he knocked out Nate, turned his lights off. Yes, he's a pro basketball player, 3-time NBA slam dunk champion, athletic background, but he wasn't a fighter. But the adjustments I saw him make and what he learned in that short amount of time told us, wow, this is no joke. He's going to get something done. Then obviously he had the Ben Askren. Then he had the Woodley fight. My question is going to be, how much training did Woodley have? Because I think if Woodley had a full training camp, it'd be hard for me to bet against Woodley.
I mean, I don't think Woodley's ever in terrible shape or something like that. You know, and it's only 8 rounds. And, you know, in fairness to the first fight, it wasn't like there was a ton of activity.
Yes.
I think that's pretty fair. I don't know. The thing about Jake, it's like, I'm not sure what to say about this, because the Fury fight to me actually would have been a little bit better for the rest of us. But I think that Jake and Tyron 2 is going to be better for them.
Yeah.
Tyron gets this other payday, whatever it's worth, which is great for him, obviously. But here's what I mean. It's like Tommy, I don't know if he's better or worse than Tyron, depending on the thing, but he's going to have a natively boxing style, and so that would have been somewhat clarifying about how far he can take this, because I covered this guy years ago. I don't even know what he's up to these days. This was around 2011 or so. There was this dude. He was what was he? He was an All-American linebacker for Michigan State, so he was a Spartan. He was a heavyweight boxer named Seth Mitchell. And huge power, just monster power, at least at the time he was coming up. And there was a question like, can this guy get into boxing age 23, 24 and like make something of it? And he got like to 20 plus pro wins and was just clubbing these guys. And then he had to kind of fight real dudes, and the whole shit fell apart. Like the whole thing fell apart. And so it's like with Jake, it's like, how good can he get? He might be able to get pretty decent, and I'm sure he can beat a lot of fighters that we like. Maybe Tyron, we'll see. I don't really know. But at some point, like, do I think he can avoid what Seth Mitchell couldn't? I am very skeptical of that. There's some point he's going to need to like graduate to fight real dudes, and real dudes are gonna be a problem, you know.
Well, when do you think that would happen?
I don't know, because this would be his 6th fight?
Yeah.
5th fight, something like that.
Yeah. Yes.
So you're not talking like, you're not fighting real dudes till your 15th fight, or maybe something along those lines. I mean, it really depends, obviously, but not anytime soon. So he's got a while to go. But like the dudes who are real dudes who you're going to meet at 15-0, they've been doing this since they were 7. I mean, they've got 20 years on you. You know, like it's not going to go well. It doesn't. Dude, boxing is fucking hard. You ever seen these MMA fighters? They talk about boxing training. They're like, dude, it's way easier. And they're right about something, right? The injury load is, okay, Fury broke his rib, but in general, you talk to MMA fighters who like dabble in boxing, like, oh my God, I'm so much healthier. Like, I don't feel so banged up all the time. And it's specific. I'm doing one thing all day, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, dude, here's what you got to respect. The dudes who you're doing this with are at the highest level. They're boxing contemporaries. They've been doing this shit since they were 7. Their timing and their accuracy is... Yes, it's a narrower, constrained universe of fighting. We don't have kicks, we don't have takedowns. But in that universe, their specificity is hard to contemplate, dude. I always bring us up as an example. Look at the shot that Crawford landed on Kell Brook to put him out. I'm talking about Tom Brady hitting someone 50 yards downfield in the tiniest of windows. Dude, that doesn't happen unless you have 30 years under your belt of boxing, basically. And you're a sick athlete and everything else. So, like... You know, they're different sports, obviously, but there's that reality should be respected, I think.
So I do agree that if we did see the Tommy Fury-Jake Paul fight, it would legitimize everything in our circles, in the fight community, in both the boxing and you can argue the MMA world too. But let's go back to Tommy Fury pulling out of this fight. What do you make of the situation? Because you know MMA fighters have fought with worse injuries.
Mm-hmm.
And we did see the clips of Tyson Fury taking the heavy medicine ball right to the obliques, right to the ribs over and over again. He was here training in Vegas at one point for this fight camp with Suge Hill. Then he went back overseas and went to train with Tyson and John Fury, his father. don't know basically all of the whole scope of the picture. Maybe that's going to continue to come about over time, but this can't help the reputation and the look of Tommy Fury in the eyes of the boxing community, climbing and growing as a professional boxer and separating himself from the shadows of his older brother.
Yeah, the thing is, I mean, I feel bad for the guy on one level. Dude, that's a big family, literally and figuratively, to like have to answer to and a name to preserve. That's tough, man. That can't be easy. Like, oh, your brother's the fucking heavyweight champion of the world. And not just that, like an incredible one, maybe the best one ever.
One of the greats of all time.
Like, it's like, dude, how do you live up to that shit? And, and he's ugly. You're the handsome one. You know what I mean? Like, you're supposed to be, you know what I mean? Like, it must be very difficult to be him. So on one level, I have genuine, in that sense, sympathy. On the other hand, I saw that shit too with the injury or the medicine ball, and I'm like, they're trying to like make a man out of him. Have you noticed that?
Yeah.
They're trying to like, trying to make him one of their own in that way, and maybe he's built for it, maybe he's not. I guess we'll see. The one thing I would say about the injury though is, you're right. I have seen MMA fighters go in there with like insane injuries, but that was a big fight for him. Like if you took a shot to the sternum, how much could he resist that without painkillers? I don't know. The other part is, folks forget this, Khabib almost retired off a rib injury. Khabib had a rib injury. He had broken rib, and it was so painful to him. This was 2012 or 13, maybe a little bit later than that. He admitted it was so awful, he nearly quit the sport. Dude, that shit will bring you to your knees, man. It's hard to breathe. It's hard to move. I've separated ribs before. I've never broken one, and it was awful.
It's what made Tyron Woodley stop the fight against Colby Covington.
Right. So
rib injury.
You're talking about like tough dudes who are saying no, thank you. If he had a broken rib, I'm not in a position to say much about it personally.
Were you talking about more of like Jake graduating or kind of fighting a quote more of a boxer in Tommy Fury?
I thought it would be more interesting. Like, not that I'm rooting for it. I don't have a competing interest, but. Like, what would Jake have done if he had lost, like, cleanly? Well,
and what happened? That's a real question to ask for this fight too. I mean, if he loses this fight, obviously it sets it up for the trilogy fight and stuff like that. So he's going to have to get through Woodley in order, one way or another, whether he wins this fight and moves on, or whether he loses and then has to win a trilogy. He's going to have to get through Tyron Woodley to take the next chapter in his career. But it's really interesting to see what the direction they're going in, because obviously they've chosen the MMA route of choosing MMA fighters and people with a wrestling background, where wrestlers have certain tendencies that they've had their entire lives when it comes to defense and when it comes to striking, how they've matured in mixed martial arts. But it's going to be very interesting to see the path that they want to go on. And I kind of hinted at, Nate Diaz, because I know he's looking for names. I know he's looking to build the brand. And obviously Nate's buddy is fighting on this card. And it's a natural storyline for him to get to, and Nate only having one more fight left on his contract for the UFC.
Also, what's kind of interesting is, let me just throw this out here. If Nate were to have a fight in the UFC and get out of it relatively unscathed, whatever that means, like it wasn't some devastating beating or something, not like Gaethje versus Ferguson. So now he's on a free market, and a fight works out between him and Jake. Is it automatic? Listen to the words I'm saying. Is it automatic that Diaz beats him 10 times out of 10? I don't think it's automatic. He beats him 10. You might favor him to win. And there's gonna be like, oh my God, I can't believe he said it. Listen to what I'm saying. If you're favoring Diaz to win, that's fine. And certainly as a combat athlete, his bona fides, Jake couldn't ever touch. I want to be very clear about that. But at this juncture, Jake's whole shit is luring people into thinking he is garbage and that some real athlete is going to come along and kick his ass, and then it keeps not happening. Nate, I grant, is a different animal who has trained in boxing. We all know the story. I get it. I'm familiar with the facts. But I think that there's a lot of assumptions made about Jake that I guess we'll get more clarification here against Tyron, right? Maybe he looks bad and I'll go, oh, wait, no, Nate would tune him up. I'm just saying Nate might tune him up. Nate might even be likely to tune him up. I just don't know if it's automatic he tunes him up.
I think the golden goose for him in this sport is Conor McGregor. I think that's what it's all leading up to, regardless of where Conor's at. For Jake Paul. He wants the Conor McGregor fight, 100%. But here's what I argue. It wasn't too long ago, I think it was a few months ago, Dana White, after a fight night press conference, he was asked about Anderson Silva's performance. Anderson Silva had just won against
beat Julio
Cesar
Chavez.
Chavez.
Oh, the big one, yeah.
Yes. And then Dana revealed and said, you know what? Maybe, Anderson Silva should be looked at as the greatest combat sports athlete of all time.
Yeah.
And that got me thinking, and if I'm Jake Paul and I'm his team, I want the Anderson Silva fight, because then you just had Dana White say Anderson Silva is the greatest combat sports athlete of all time. You get Jake Paul to fight him, and if he could pull it off and beat Anderson Silva, who, if he would have just stayed as a professional boxer, I think would have been a world champion.
Yes, I agree with that.
Yeah.
You could argue, if you're Jake Paul, you're the greatest combat sports athlete.
I would say this.
You'd run with that.
It's an interesting proposition. I would say this: if I was managing Jake, and I'm not, but if I was, and someone came to us with the Anderson Silva fight, I would say no, thank you. I think Anderson Silva fucks him up, and I would say that's automatic. I think, but besides the fact that you're like, well, what's the difference between Nate and Anderson? Because Anderson's obviously longer in the tooth in MMA, but. He's bigger, for one. I mean, he went up to 205 and was giving people problems.
They're actually like similar sizes.
Yeah. But I'm saying relative to Nate, Anderson is much bigger.
Yes. Well, Jake and Anderson, I was saying, are relatively the same size.
Yeah, and also just this new life that Anderson has shown has been, did I see it coming? No, I did not, dude. It has been quite a surprise and a pleasant one at that. Amazing, right?
Yeah.
He's going to box again, too, right?
Yeah, I'm told that his asking prices are high. That's the issue, I'm told. And dude, if you're Anderson, fuck off, right? Like, if I'm Anderson Silva and I'm like, I don't even need to box. If I want to box, you're going to pay me exorbitant. I completely get it, but that may be limiting his options a little bit. But good for him. I hope he gets paid every dollar he's entitled to.
And for the rematch, Jake versus Tyron, what does Tyron need to do to secure a win?
Well, the thing you raised earlier is really the X factor here, or the most important thing. To what extent is he in shape? I mean, boxing, you've probably played around a little bit, dude. If you've never hit a heavy bag for 3 rounds, you are going to be on your hands and knees when you're done. I don't care if you're a mountain biker. I don't care if you're in the weight room, dude. Hitting the heavy bag, forget having an opponent, will fuck you up. So what I would say is they have to make a calculation about what kind of rounds he can deliver. How much of this can you actually do? Maybe they'll just determine it's 4 good rounds in me before the problems begin. Do you put that at the front end and just say, let's put hurting on this guy with the rounds that we have? Do you do the Lomachenko and give away the first 6 rounds and then try to really put it on him in the last 6? Obviously, I think it'll be another 8-round fight, I suspect. So you have some questions you have to ask about that, but that will define everything. What kind of cardio does he have? And how much can that impact the 8-round strategy? My guess is they're going to have to apportion the offense, but how they apportion it, I don't know.
I'm really excited for the NBA versus NFLer. The Frank Gore, the future Hall of Famer, running back, who has hands, where did I read it from? It was reported that Chael Sonnen turned down that fight with Frank Gore.
Did I hear that too?
I did read that too.
And we'll get to that in a second.
Wait, turn down a boxing fight?
Boxing match with Frank Gore.
Because it was an MMA fight, no, of course not. That would be, even old Chael could get it done.
I'm hoping to get some clarity from old Chael in the flesh himself on this too. Okay. He's here this weekend. Yeah. We'll see him tonight. Yeah. I'm hoping to get some clarity there, but he's fighting Deron Williams, former point guard, NBA All-Star. I know him from his University of Illinois days. Fighting Illini. He was fantastic, and he was a great NBA player. But he's a part owner, I think, of Fortis MMA with Saif Sahoud and that whole team, and he has been training MMA and obviously some striking for quite some time. It's a little bit of a freak show, but it's intriguing because you have 2 guys who are at the top of 2 different sports, and there's a height advantage for one, but I would never thought I would see an all-star point guard against an all-star running back in a boxing match.
I got to say, this is the other part of the card that I can recall. The other ones I'm not up to speed on. But what I would say is, this has always been something I've had debates with friends. Who are the best athletes in America? Are they NBA players or are they NFL players? And obviously, again, there's going to be a wide disparity. No one is going to say that Vince Wilfork is the best athlete. He's strong as shit and was an amazing football player, but he's, almost 400 pounds. It's probably not peak athleticism in that sense per se. But I told the story on, I think I was on Morning Combat maybe today or the other day. My first job out of college, right out of college, I moved to New York City within months, and I graduated with a philosophy degree. There wasn't a lot of jobs, so I leaned on my military experience, and I got a job doing security for Cartier on 5th Avenue. And sometimes that would require me to be on the floor there, not every time. And celebrities were coming in pretty frequently, but usually what happens is celebrities would have a person that would call ahead, and everything would be, they would rush him in, they'd have a discreet little room, but sometimes they just walked in off the street. And I remember one time Rasheed Wallace walked in off the street, and Rasheed's he's a 7-footer or pretty close to it.
Yeah.
Did you ever see him like not just a 7-footer in person, but like an athlete 7-footer? Remember, he can probably run faster than you or I, certainly can jump higher.
We've seen Shaq in person a few times.
You know what I mean? And Shaq's, he's old, but you get a real clear sense, like, dude, these are different animals completely.
Yeah.
And so you wonder, like, how does that match up with someone who is a little bit more accessible in terms of height, but just has explosivity, like a Frank Gore, explosivity out the ass, and all the kind of stuff that they can. I'm sure I'm gonna get Bohashina depoted for that, but you get the idea, like this incredible other kind of athleticism that's similar but different. And when the two, this wouldn't settle the debate, but it is fun to see because I've had that debate with my friends for decades, quite literally. I can't wait. I've
actually had that debate too, but. Do you think it's the NFL player or do you think it's the NBA player?
So I've long believed it's the NFL player, but I might be rethinking that a little bit, man.
I've gone back and forth, but I actually do lean towards the NBA player.
For what reason?
A few of them. For one, there's 53 people on an NFL roster versus 15 people on an NBA lineup. So it's harder to get into for an NBA player to just share numbers. If you're looking from the numbers game,
that's fair.
I look at it from
and it's
that
international, so it's very selective.
Yes. If you look at the game of football, there's offense and there's defense and there's special teams. There's 3 facets. So you have guys that could play on 2 sides, like being special teams and defense or special teams and offense. But in the NBA, there's offense and defense to play. Like me, I always consider the greatest basketball player and my idol in sports growing up. I'm from Chicago. I'm biased. Is Michael Jeffrey Jordan, his airness. What always separated Jordan, if you wanted to argue of him as the greatest, basketball player of all time versus someone you would argue is the greatest football player of the time, maybe it's Jerry Rice or maybe it's Joe Montana. At that time growing up, you can argue obviously Brady now. But Jordan had to play both sides of the ball. He was All-NBA defensive first team. He was Defensive Player of the Year, and obviously he had all the scoring titles and the accolades from the offensive side of the ball. So you always had to be on the court at all times playing both ends of it. So I feel like that is a factor into it as well. And then obviously the measurables. Obviously the NFL, they have the combine. You got the bench press and the 40 and stuff like that. And the NBA, they have their type of measurables and their version of a combine too. But I feel like the litmus test for the NBA player goes on beyond just what they do in February for the NFL Combine. I feel like there's always a test for that. You have a D-League now where people get sent to, or if they go to, if they don't want to play college or overseas, you go to the D-League and you work your way up. They have their own minor league system, kind of like baseball has too.
G-League.
G-League, exactly. The NFL, you don't have that. It's college, you make it, or you go to the NFL, or you go to the XFL, the CFL, or the AF, if that's still around anymore. Mm-hmm. So that adds into play as well in the numbers game as well too. So I just think because of the few spots available and getting a litmus test for athleticism, and obviously you do see the freak shows. You see the 7-footers that have to bang in the inside, and now you have to be a 3-point shot. You have to be able to pick and pop and shoot from the outside now if you're going to make it in the NBA. I always thought, if I'm 6'6" or above, I'm going to make it in the NBA and stuff like that. Growing up now, I would never feel that way because you can't just be 6'6". You have to be 6'6" and have freakish skills. Yeah. And I think that's the evolution we've seen, and that's why I said the NBA player being the better.
It's a fair point. I one time was I didn't have courtside seats, but I had good seats for a Wizards game, and I remember looking on the floor, and this is the time John Wall played, and John Wall was the shortest person on the court at the time, and he's my height. Yeah. And I was like, oh, fuck, you're just surrounded by the monsters at all times. But for the NFL thing, the one thing I would say is you do get a certain kind of NFL player, like the DK Metcalf types.
Oh my gosh!
The 6'4", 240 guys, the tight end types, like those dudes. They're like CrossFit guys times 10.
Oh yeah. Oh, and I don't want to shortchange anything. The Khalil Macks and stuff. Imagine if Khalil Mack. I think Sean Merriman talked about it recently. If Khalil Mack was a mixed martial arts fighter,
right?
Like
Herschel Walker back in the day.
Herschel Walker, right? No, there are players. There are people in the league right now that are far better athletes than some of the people in the NBA. I'm just going by collective numbers.
Yeah, it's a fair point you make. That's a decent point. The only thing I would say too, though, is. The thing about football is because each position is so oddly specific, it's hard to get the athleticism I think you see with the NBA. But, I've read this point a million times. Like, there's 32, for folks there's a lot of MMA fans who don't watch sports, so I'll just make it as clear as I can. There's 32 NFL teams. Let me just be very clear about this. There are not 32 good quarterbacks on earth.
No.
There are maybe 20. Maybe.
Yeah.
They can't find. They literally cannot find 32 good quarterbacks. That is how hard that position is to play. But Tom Brady is hardly hitting bench press records, and he's the fucking best. So
yeah. I was actually having an NFL debate too. I named a bunch of these young quarterbacks, the Trevor Lawrences.
He annoys
Justin
me.
Fields.
That hair of his. I'm like, dude, this is how I knew became old. I'm like, cut your fucking hair, hippie. And then I'm like, oh my god.
He's like Sunshine from Remember the Titans.
I haven't seen that movie in so long.
Remember the quarterback with the long hair? Is that Sunshine? Was that Sunshine?
This is the Denzel's in this movie. Yes. Yeah, I know.
He's the coach. Yeah. But I was like listing a bunch of these young quarterbacks. I'm a Bears fan, so obviously I threw Justin Fields' name in there, Joe Burrow and stuff like that, and then I threw out the name Justin Herbert. And I think Justin Herbert, just looking at his skill set, I'm not putting Patrick Mahomes in this because he's already graduated, he's already elite. I'm talking about the guys drafted in the past 2-3 years. Mm-hmm. I think Justin Herbert has got the most potential for Hall of Fame type career and that future mold for NFL quarterback. I love Justin Herbert's skill set.
So who was the guy in Chicago he replaced? Because he didn't start the season. That was the big controversy, right? They all wanted him because they drafted Fields.
Andy Dalton.
Dalton, that's who it was. And then they were like, we're going to start Dalton. Like, this is your guy. Anyway, he's killing. I have not paid attention too much to Chicago's game.
No offensive line.
Yeah, I watch my shitty-ass team who just drives me nuts, Washington football team.
Yeah.
And, we got Heineke under center. So
you have an amazing wide receiver, though.
Oh, and Terry McLaurin?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's Scary Terry's the best. He's fucking
catches
amazing.
Everything.
It's an okay team this season, but dude, they've been, I say this is a real thing. You can go to a bar in Washington, D.C. and be served by a bartender who has been alive long enough to both have that job and have never seen the Washington football team in a Super Bowl. That is how long it has been. It's awful.
We both have two dysfunctional franchises. I think as long as the McCaskies are still owning the Bears, we're going nowhere. And
but dude, so they still play at Soldier Field?
Yeah.
Dude, Chicago still gets busy for Soldier Field.
They need to move to not far where I grew up. I grew up in Buffalo Grove. They just bought the land for Arlington Heights. There's a racetrack there that's now abandoned. This whole land. Just like how the Dallas Cowboys, they don't play in Dallas. They play in Arlington. Yeah. It's a suburb. Same thing for Chicago. Bring the revenue. It's right off the 53 freeway. You can get so much more money in that city, so much more accessible than going down to Soldier Field. The tailgate situation sucks. The traffic sucks. I think it used to be considered like a national landmark and stuff like that, but they haven't kept it up recently too. And they renovated that whole stadium like 15 years ago. They haven't really touched it since then, and it's no longer like a national landmark.
You should see FedEx Field.
Yeah, I've heard that too. I
will say though, how is Allegiant? Because it looks cool driving.
It's fantastic. Yeah. I love it. It's amazing. It reminds me
of... Can you tailgate there?
Yeah.
Okay.
It reminds me of even... have you been to the Cardinals Stadium in Glendale, the Arizona Cardinals?
No, I've not.
It reminds me of the next version, the updated version of that. Okay. I haven't been to Jerry's World in Dallas.
I've been to Jerry's World. It's extremely nice, yes.
We've only seen the outside of it.
They have a Victoria's Secret inside.
Wow.
For the women who want to go shopping, it has that in it. Yeah.
That's knowing your audience right there.
Yeah, exactly. No, seriously, they want to get a more diverse audience to the ballpark. That's what you do.
And they know that, hey, the husbands are going to watch the game, the women are going to shop for the bras.
Jerry didn't do it by accident,
No, he did.
He's smart. I hate him, but he's smart.
Yeah. The Bears, no offensive line. But I was going to say this, the one more note on the Washington team is the Bears, that they were smart because that one year we got to the Super Bowl and we lost to Peyton Manning, 2006, Lovie Smith and everything.
Lovey.
But who's the D coordinator? The Chicago fans love their legends. The D coordinator was Riverboat Ron Rivera.
Was he really?
The biggest mistake the Bears made was letting him go, letting him walk. He became the coach of the Panthers and everything. He should have been the next head coach of the Bears. He's a hero. He's an 85 Bear, and the Bears love their Chicago sports heroes. He would have been the perfect fit, defensive-minded. He knows that city. He knows that town. He knows the blood. The blue-collar blood of what makes the Bears the Bears, and he should have been our head coach.
I didn't know they let him go. I mean, we used to have Sean McVay. We used to have all kinds of dudes who were, at the time, skins coaches, Washington football team. So we let them all rock too. That's what dysfunctional franchises do, bro. They don't identify talent; they let it walk. So
they don't.
What are you gonna do? It's a violent game, but it's fun. I like it.
You are, just like MMA and just like boxing, these head-on collisions and stuff like that. Anytime you sign up for a sport where there's going to be head trauma.
Bro, did you watch Ben Roethlisberger last night? Getting up, dude. I don't know what his brain looks like, but I'm guessing it's not going to be money when his career is up, because God knows how much punishment he's taken. And just last night, I don't know how many sacks he took. He was getting demolished.
So they were losing 26-0 in the third quarter, and then we went to dinner, I know, last night.
Yeah.
But they ended up coming back and only losing by 10 and scoring in the 20s. So I didn't see what happened.
Only losing by 8, by one score.
Maybe it was one score. Yeah, I didn't see what happened at the back half of the third quarter and the fourth quarter, but he must have done some sort of heroics.
Yeah.
He had 3 fantasy points with 8 minutes left to go in the third quarter. He ended up finishing with 26 fantasy points. I know this because my buddy who I went up against,
he got you?
He got me. He had Roethlisberger and Dalvin Cook.
He gets so pissed off
Dude,
because of his fantasy.
I had to
team.
stop doing fantasy because it's too real, man. You just get too bitter. I was bad at it, and so it was constantly frustrating.
All of my college friends, we have a 14-team league, and we've been doing this for a decade now. And and I'm the guy who works in sports, but obviously my focus is combat sports.
Right.
But they hold it over my head every single week if they beat me. Oh, if I don't make the playoffs, I don't hear the end of it. I need to win to get in the playoffs because only 6 teams make it this week, and I'm already down 60-something points.
I one time, this is a true story. I was so pissed at my friends. I did this for a whole season. I auto-drafted the whole season, and I actually beat 2 of them by just auto-drafting. I talk shit from an auto-draft perspective against 2 of these guys for the entire summer. It was with the winner, whatever.
I fucking hate Dr. Stamps, David Stamps. He's in first place. He never wins. I think he was in surgery during the draft. His whole team's auto-draft. He's lost 1 game all season. All of us are 5-7 and shit like that. I hate it, man.
That's awesome.
Because we all spend the time to prepare, study for weeks to mock drafts.
Dude, it's fantasy is brutal.
It's intense.
It's intense.
It's super. That's why I couldn't do it anymore, man. I'm out. It was too much.
Yeah, I don't even know how you really do a fantasy mixed martial arts, but I feel like
I've played some of them. They seem fine, interesting.
It's hard though. There's too much unknown involved.
Yeah. Usually it's just can you get a parlay? Because it used to be how much could you get of the full card? You guys were, I remember when the UFC did back-to-back cards on Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
Yeah.
And I remember one time, this is a true story, I got all of the fights on Thursday correct. I got all of the fights on Friday, which included was Alvarez beating RDA. And then that Saturday, which was the actually big, important card, I think I got 3 fights right. I mean, I took a fucking dump on it. Terrible. Which, A, shows you how hard predictions are, and B, you just got to get a small little window of success and then call that a day on MMA. It's too hard.
For sure.
Well, on the note of predictions, though, what do you think about the co-main and the main tomorrow?
And then we'll get out of there on wrapping up on this fight night for pay-per-view.
Okay, so I'll say this. I've been wrong about Charles Oliveira a lot. I'm just saying that for your audience's sake. I've been wrong about Oliveira a lot. I might be wrong about him here. I like Poirier in this one. I would say that I actually do believe that I actually think that Oliveira has more ways to win, because his coach Mike Brown, or Poirier's coach Mike Brown, was he's got one way to win. Respectfully, and I do mean that respectfully because I covered Mike Brown's career.
Which way did Brown say his one way was to win?
Choking or some kind
Submission,
of jiu-jitsu, some kind of stuff. And so I'm obviously that's a threat, but I actually think he is a threat on the feet. Maybe not so much to finish him there, but win rounds, cause problems on the ground thereafter. Yeah, that's a thing you have to take seriously. So I also think he could wrestle Poirier potentially a little bit as well. But I'm going to go with Poirier. I just feel like he's, of the two, much more battle-tested, even though obviously Oliveira's been in the trenches as well. And I think the power. I think eventually that power is going to cause problems. I don't think that Oliveira is in any way the quitter that he sometimes has been made out to be, but I do think that under duress he loses composure in ways that, for example, Nogueira did not. And I think that will make a difference in the end.
I want to see what happens when Poirier attacks his body. And I want to see this thing go to the later rounds, because Oliveira's never tasted championship rounds before. He's never felt 4 and 5.
And dude, fucking when did Poirier stop Gaethje? In round 4?
Right.
Dude, he's been in the fucking battles. You know what I mean? And you can see his championship medal. And Max kind of had some moments a little bit in that 4th round as well. And then Poirier still came out and did what he did. So Oliveira is the real deal, and he is a deserving champion. I just think Poirier is his time, but we'll see. I don't know.
Yeah. Do you give...
Amanda Nunes?
Do you give Juliana Pena... I mean...
Dude, okay, I'll just say this. MMA is fucking crazy. Yeah. And every time I have thought, okay, I've got a beat on this now. Now I've figured out how things work. The MMA gods come down and they just jumble shit in ways you can't explain, and now you have to rethink things. Is there a case on tape or on paper that makes you convincingly believe that Juliana Pena can win? Not for me. I don't see it. That's not the case, for example, with Kayla Harrison. I could very much see her beating Amanda Nunes. Again, it's debatable, but you can see the case. I don't see it. But, dude, Amanda Nunes is as successful as can be. It's going to be hard to maintain motivation. If she at all didn't take Pena that seriously or didn't train up to par, this is the night of Pena's life. This is another day at the office. I'm not making the case for Pena. I am making the case that people who just think that greatness has inertia in mixed martial arts, it just keeps going forever. Dude, it comes to a halt when you least expect it. My prediction, formally, is for Amanda. I am merely cautioning the audience to say that if Pena wins, yes, it would be surprising, but not altogether that insane. I have seen more insane results in my life, trust me.
Shout out Chicago. I think she trains at Elmer's. I mean, she's
a transplant though, right? She's not from
I
Chicago.
think she spent time in like Washington, the greater Washington area too. But I agree. I mean, how do you not agree?
Yeah.
It's I like the warning though. I like it, and we have seen crazy things happen in this.
Dude, I remember where I was when I saw Matt Serra knuckle GSP into the canvas.
That was in Texas, right?
Yeah, it was in Texas. I remember thinking, like, what in the fuck did I just... Dude, they didn't give Matt Serra a prayer. Yeah. Prayer. And then he knuckled him inside of a round into the canvas. Dude, I've seen it. I've seen it.
So go back to what happened in the forum when Nunes knuckled Cyborg. Did you see that happening that way in that first round?
I think I thought that Amanda would win, but I didn't think she would dispatch her with ease the way she did. That was the one I was like... And the Holly Holm one, too. Like, dude, she was... I mean, she made it look like it was a joke, and it's not. We know it's not a joke. But for Amanda, it kind of was. And, again, that's what I'm saying. Like, dude, on paper, I don't really know what Juliana's path to victory. I mean, maybe she can get her down. I don't know. I'll just say that, like, MMA is a strange, strange thing. It's why you see guys at the top for very short reigns, because it's difficult and crazy and unpredictable.
It's why we love this sport, and we absolutely loved having you on the Schmozone podcast. I feel like we could have done this for another hour at least.
Yeah, maybe in Tampa we can get together. We'll see how things go.
100%. We'll see you next week in Tampa. Yeah. We'll continue it.
Travel safe to Florida. Oh, fuck me.
Yeah, I know. It's a different
I heard
city.
The weather's nice, though.
State.
You know what I've noticed? We'll wrap on this. The drivers in Las Vegas, they're not great because you guys don't have the traffic cameras here. I think that plays a big role. The drivers in Florida, motherfucker, you are taking your life into your hands to turn right.
Yeah, they're
it's
crazy.
Insane.
Yes, I agree.
No, growing up in the Midwest, Midwest drivers are good, but the West Coast, because of so many transplants and international drivers, the drivers there suck. Same thing with Florida, too. Tons of transplants there. Any state where you have transplants of drivers, you're asking for road rage, you're asking for wrecks all over the place.
Yeah, and Florida also a little bit weird.
Very fucking weird. Episode 87 of the Schmozone podcast, the great Luke Thomas. We are out.